And hi, I'm Bryce,
Hi, I'm Chris.
and welcome to AI Augmented.
Um, so yeah, we thought we'd have a catch up, Bryce. We're good friends. We talk about AI a lot. We
Yep.
thought maybe people would find it interesting listening into some of our conversations. And we talked about, well, there's been a few things going on in the news this week and kind of what was significant. But I think really both of us said, well, it's right now it's all about Google.
I definitely want to start by just talking about what's been most impactful to me, which is actually just Gemini 2.5 Pro. So I am a very heavy user of Cursor. Um, it is, Chris, you might have heard of
How
this
much is
app
your
called
bill? How
Cursor.
much is your bill?
I'll admit it's
Oh,
probably not as high as yours. I stick within the $20 a month.
how is that
I
possible?
Okay, maybe I'm not as high of and heavy of a user as I thought, but I also use. I lean a lot on Perplexity to get me started, and then once I'm like ready to go, then I go to Cursor. But yeah, so maybe I can't claim to be a very heavy user of Cursor, but I am a very
To be
dedicated
fair,
user of
they're
Cursor.
quite generous with their slow requests, aren't they? So when you run out of
They
fast
are.
ones, then actually the slow ones are pretty good too.
So, for anyone who hasn't used Cursor or is not familiar with it, think of Visual Studio Code, but with easy ways to access LLMs built into it. By now, I would imagine everyone who's watching this and anyone who has an internet connection has tried using ChatGPT to generate some code and has seen that, in some cases it can be quite helpful. But if you've ever found yourself copying and pasting between ChatGPT and Visual Studio Code and felt like it's taking too much time. It's kind of annoying. Cursor solves that problem quite well. I did not mean for this to turn into an ad for Cursor, but I'm a big fan of it.
Checks in the post.
Yep. Yeah, so having the very clean, smooth integration between your IDE and an LLM makes a pretty significant difference. And so I kind of just like pretty much everyone else have been using Claude for a while now because I think Anthropic has had back-to-back best models out there for coding with 3.5 Sonnet and 3.7 Sonnet.
Mm, mm.
I'll be honest, I forgot if there was one that came out in between, but in my book,
L-
Claude is pretty good.
Let's not go there. That was the whole. It's really 3.6, but we're gonna call it exactly the same name, 3.5 Saga, even though it's like so much better. So
Uh, so we're
yeah.
gonna.
Anyway,
I've blotted a lot of things out of my memory because I'm like, yeah, it's not that critical. So, anyways, all you need to know is Claude 3.7 Sonnet was the best, or yeah, was the best for coding. You could argue that's a matter of opinion. I'm sure there are some people who find other models better, but I think generally the consensus is 3.7 Sonnet. And in some ways, it is arguably still the best, and we'll touch on that in a minute of ways in which Sonnet still is can be preferable to Gemini. But Google's Gemini really takes things to another level. I personally just used it yesterday to generate system architecture diagrams for the project that we're working on, and it's pretty darn good. I don't think I saw a single hallucination in the entire diagram across however many thousands of lines of code we have.
Mhm.
And the only complaint that I would have would be that the level of detail to get the right level of detail, it needed a little bit of encouragement of helping it to sort of break things down into starting from the system, break it down into modules, and inside those modules, break things down a bit more. But to be fair, as I think we're all learning with AI, with LLMs, you're gonna need some hand holding, and that's kind of to be expected.
Mm.
Yeah, Gemini 2.5 Pro, pretty darn impressive for coding, pretty darn impressive for architecture.
It's interesting. I've been using it for a couple of weeks now. My underlying feeling is that, like, for a lot of things in code, it's actually better than Claude. But what Anthropic have done wonderfully well with Claude is make it an engaging communicator. So I'll do the thing that none of us are meant to do, which is anthropomorphize the LLMs. And I also avoid that word because I never say it right, but never mind. So the way I see it is, if you work it in a company and you've got other coders around you, talented people, then that's amazing. You've got a resource to draw on. And sometimes I wouldn't know. I mean, I've never had a coding job, but like sometimes you probably have a choice between the person who has just the most insane technical ability and the one who's very technically good, but actually is a great communicator and really good at explaining things and very calm and very patient. And in most scenarios, you're going to go to the person who communicates well because it's just easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that you've seen as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, what else? I mean, so I mean, in terms of working with people, absolutely. I would imagine that everyone has been in or most people have been in a situation where they're trying to interact with someone who's quite bright but struggles with communicating a lot of things, and then someone who's pretty bright, maybe not like the brightest, but still quite good and can communicate well, and they have a much better experience there. In terms of like talking about the models, I mean, I'll be honest, I definitely see like I see what you're talking about. Like there's something kind of qualitatively just more smooth or requires less effort to read through what Claude has written, and it feels like. Yeah, not to anthropomorphize too much, but just like the way it speaks, its mannerisms are just more uh, like easy for communication or uh, I don't want to say friendly because it's not a matter of like politeness or anything. It's just the
I don't know. I mean,
to be
Anthropic has
friends.
spent a lot of time on the personality, and I think a lot of people have said that like that actually makes a difference. So I wouldn't shy away from saying that.
Okay, I mean, I think yeah, that's yeah. So yeah, the personality, the I guess the friendliness is just kind of higher.
Hmm.
On the other hand, I think I'm kind of used to by now interacting with people who are quite very bright and not the best communicators. So I think I've kind of uh,
You've nailed that one already.
gotten more use how to in my own brain. I have my own neural networks trained to communicate and work in those settings. So
Yeah, I do think that the personality is like a thing. Like just
mm,
like I mean, I've done over 12 hours coding today in TypeScript. For
mm,
the first 8, 10 hours, I was using Sonnet, Claude, and then I was really hitting into issues, and I switched into to kind of Gemini. So there's two aspects to it, really. Like, first of all, it's just so much easier communicating with Claude because like the way that OpenAI are now talking about like GPT 4.5, it's like, well, it feels different. And, if you ask
yeah,
it something short, it gives you a short answer. It understands the intent a lot better. Like Claude is brilliant at that. And one of the way people see LLMs in coding is like a pair programmer, right? So
yes,
like actually that's really, really important, that kind of interaction, because it makes things so much easier for you. You don't need to be cognitively on edge the whole time. But at the same time, like I said, I got to the point where it kind of got stuck. And I thought, well, actually, I've had really good success with Gemini, so let's give this a go. Now, immediately I noticed a difference because it's so dry. It's just everything is like very, very detailed, and they're always throwing in. It seems to use like code tags for like every single variable name and all those kind of things. Right, function names, pretty much anything technical, it kind of
yes.
wraps in these tags. Like it's so horrible to read. It's really, really hard work. But the bottom line is that it's sorted out in about 15 minutes what Claude couldn't do in 2 hours. And it's
That's a
not just
pretty
that,
stark contrast, actually.
yeah, yeah, because I think we've all been in that situation where they just kind of get themselves in a loop and get confused, and it's like, yeah, there's no kind of getting out of this.
Yes.
But
Ladies and
I,
gentlemen, the first term that we're going to define today is doom loop. All
I
right.
Team loop, nice.
Doom loop
So
when the
yeah,
LLM gets stuck. Sorry, go on.
yeah, no, just thinking about it, it's like I say, I think there's a couple of bits. First of all, the context really helps. And the thing is, I'm not just talking about like the overall context length, the fact that you could chuck a million tokens at it, but in my experience, these models, which are able to cope with higher context lengths, are able to be a lot more coherent across large contexts, even if it's much, much, much lower than their limit. Yeah. So if you've got, 20, 30,000 lines of code, then actually, even though it could handle like 5 times more than that, then really Gemini handles it kind of so much easier in that respect. And I think a lot of it really does come down to that if you're able to maintain coherence over much larger chunks of input, it makes it much easier to debug. Yeah.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
because that's it.
Context
I
is
think
everything.
my preference is still to build with Claude because it also like I don't think I'm going out on a limb, but I would strongly suggest it's better at code architecture and making technical decisions. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. You say Claude's better than Gemini?
Yeah, I think, like I say, Gemini is almost like more deeply technical and very, very good at finding and fixing bugs. Also, very good at like the bug fixing process because it was kind of like switching on logs, and it was like, right, refresh this, go to the logs, let's see if the blue log comes before the red log.
Hmm.
All that kind of stuff, which like Claude doesn't usually do out of the box, and it just made it so much quicker to get there. But when it comes to actually understanding intent and like, okay, here's my existing code base, I want to add to it, I want to do something which is in line with the rest of the coding standards, but of course it needs to do some new things and it needs to do them in a sensible way. I've always kind of A-B'd like for new stuff, Gemini against Claude, and like I don't think it's ever won.
Interesting. So I
Mm.
guess, yeah, now that I think about it, I don't think I've really A/B'd them on designing the architecture for new features. Like I mentioned, I just sort of A/B'd them on, what's the word? Rather than creating the architecture, reading and understanding the architecture. And I was more impressed with Gemini. But that sounds like it's kind of a common theme here that Gemini does a better job of understanding what's already been written. And then, of course, getting into the technical details better. Whereas Claude seems to almost have seems to almost be better at the bigger picture.
Yeah, maybe the word's intuitive, and maybe it's
Hmm.
kind of dangerous putting these
Yeah.
words in kind of LLMs, but like that's what it feels to me. Like it's so much better at understanding what your intent is and being able to align with that. And I would agree when it comes to Gemini and reading. So one thing that I did, so I've got some architecture documents for my, you know, new amazing project which I'm building out, and they've kind of hit over 100,000 lines now, right? Which is, to put it into perspective, about 700,000 tokens.
Hmm.
So I was able to put the entire 100,000 lines of architecture into Gemini, yeah, along with templates for my product requirement documents, yeah, and say to it, build out all the user journeys, the features, and the engineering stories to build this entire thing out. And it kind of came back with like 100 pages of completely coherent. It had taken into account everything in the architecture. Yeah, it had taken into account all of the templates and perfect coherence with the templates, perfect coherence with the prompt as well, because I told it, look, I'm going to need to like copy and paste these files individually into my code editor. Therefore, you need to tell me what each file is at the beginning of each file and then mark down for that file, not for the entire thing, but you need to set one markdown per file so that I can easily copy and paste it into my code editor. So across the board, instruction following was like really, really incredible. And the only other model I've been able to do that with is deep research, which obviously runs O3 under the hood. But that just couldn't cope. Yeah, I've
Saying just with
officially.
the context length.
Yeah, that's it. I think reaching that kind of level, because I don't think they tell you how big the context length is for O3. And plus, I'm pretty sure they do lots of clever things with like splicing up the document into separate stuff, because otherwise it would cost some insane amounts of money on inference. But yeah, I tried it 5 times the same exercise. I tried giving it the repo link like I normally do and just say, hey, go knock yourself out, get the repo link 3 times. It didn't work. I tried doing the repo mix where you just dump your entire repo into like a markdown or an XML file. I tried that a couple of times. Like every time it would get like nearly to the end and then just the deep research would hang. It just kind of couldn't cope anymore. So again, yeah, Gemini really proved itself there. And like, I've not, I mean, like, I rant and rave about OpenAI deep research all day long, and
Oh,
do
yes.
genuinely feel that O3 is a kind of next gen model. But yeah, it's the first time I've seen something which, even if it's in one area, was able to outperform OpenAI deep research.
Yeah, that is
In
interesting.
fact, on that topic, have you used the Google Deep Research yet?
I have not actually. Perhaps that's we can get a live reaction.
Well, I mean, that was one of many Google announcements this week was that they had upgraded Deep Research to use Gemini 2.5 Pro. What really shook me was that they had allegedly, because it's always very hard to know what the exact conditions are, but they had allegedly done blind testing between OpenAI and the Google Deep Research using the new model. And they actually found that the preference was 70% towards the Google one.
That's actually something I was not aware of.
Yeah, let's put that as perspective. Twice as many people preferred the Google Deep Research to the OpenAI Deep Research. And like, I'm I'm not sure I believe it because like the OpenAI one is just so good. I mean, maybe it's because it was my first, but the first time you read a 50-page document which is personalized to exactly what you need and it's word for word perfect, your kind of mind is blown.
Yeah, well, so I mean, one thing we've talked about for sure is, OpenAI's deep research, absolutely phenomenal in terms of the extent that it will do, the extent of the research it will do on its own before it reports back to you, and then the depth and the quality of the response. The garbage in, garbage out if it goes and gets garbage sources because, whatever you happen to have it search for, leads to a lot of garbage sources, you're going to get garbage back. But as long as it has good sources to pull from, the report that it gives, my impression of it is this is something that or it produces documents that are actually really effective at communicating technical and strategic information. It's very, very little, if any, fluff. It gets to the point, and it's also packs the information in very densely. And it reads pretty naturally. It doesn't read a lot of the time like an AI generated response. It just reads like you paid someone however many thousands of dollars to go out, spend a week researching whatever thing you ask them to research, and then report back on it.
Mm. And yeah, and that's probably why it impacted me so much, is because it was the first time where I saw the output of an LLM and went, this is better than what I can do. Right.
Yeah,
You know, we all know that in very narrow ways, AI can be better. Like, and a lot of it's data, right? If it can access all this data at the same time, then of course it's going to be better in certain ways. But like, this is really the first time like I saw an output, and I thought, you know what? If I had a week to do this, it would not be anywhere near as good as this was. Yeah, and that was
yeah,
a bit frightening and a bit exciting at the same time, I think.
yeah. Welcome to AI news.
Yeah, that's
It's a
AI
bit
for you, isn't
exciting, a
it?
bit frightening. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and so after this, shortly afterwards, Perplexity released their deep research, and we tried it, and it was quite disappointing. I know,
Not deep enough.
yeah, no, it was research, not too deep. I don't mean to give too much of a slight to Perplexity.
Who are
It is
awesome,
more,
honest. They're not sponsoring, but they're cool too.
yeah, no, they're good. No, we're not sponsored yet, not yet. Could be in the future, who knows? Anyways, I will say Perplexity's deep research it's definitely more thorough than, any other of its modes. But in terms of I mean, I want to be careful with this metric, but the amount of time spent by the system before responding, it's in general, it can give you some sense of how thorough the response will be. Obviously, if you want to make a system take longer artificially, you can force it to take longer by just making it wait for however many seconds you want to make it wait for. Assuming that OpenAI is not actually doing that just to make their model seem like it's thinking harder. I really hope they're not. OpenAI's deep research really does take a lot more time, and the quality does show. Perplexity, we're using a lot of qualitative terms and qualitative ways of speaking about this. In a lot of ways, this is an effective way to talk about these things because, as we know, benchmarks can be cheated on or hacked or trained on. And to some degree, like as much as I hate to describe it this way, going off of the vibes does give you some pretty good indications. And so, going off of the vibes of Perplexity, reading what their deep research produces and comparing that to OpenAI, it just feels like someone was told, all right, you got a report tomorrow. Through a report or through an assignment to a college student, said, all right, report on this by tomorrow, go get it, go find out about it. It's definitely not nothing. It'll get you some information, but it's not as thorough. You're not going to get the same depth of response to the details. I think if I were to put it one specific way, OpenAI feels like someone thought through what is this person asking? So when I ask OpenAI's deep research for something, it seems to think through what's he really asking, and then okay, what are all the details that I would need to gather and put together to give a comprehensive answer to this question? Whereas Perplexity almost takes it at face value, where it seems to not think through what are all the different details, or what are all the nuances to consider, what are all of the how can I make a response that's comprehensive. It's more like how can I make a response? I don't know if you have that exact same thought, Chris. I want to hear what you have to say on it.
I think we were talking about kind of intuition, and it feels like deep research from OpenAI has that. And I think that's very significant because it comes down to the model under the hood a lot. So it's what I've always felt about why deep research was so good because it's got O3, right? And we all know that
Yeah.
came, what, 105 in the world at Code Forces. Quite an achievement. And that's before we start talking about like AGI Arc and other things. So there's a lot of different parts, I think, when you have like an agentic system like this producing such significant results in terms of quality and quantity.
Mhm.
Like you mentioned, an important part of it is intent. Does it really truly understand your intent and what you want to get from it in the right way? The second, I think, is really around the logistics and the agentic setup. It's like what sources does it go to, what degree is it good at, choosing which sources to pay attention to and which sources not, and when to go and look for more and when not to. And I don't know if you've ever sat there kind of watching what it's doing, but like there feels like there's a lot of curiosity there where it reads through one
Yes.
article and it goes, this is throwing up some things that we maybe hadn't considered so far. So let's go now and pull on that thread and do a bit more research. And then the final thing is kind of bringing it all together. And that's where I think that OpenAI has the advantage because of the quality of the model behind it. And I haven't done any deep research with the new Google one, but if it's got 2.5 behind the hood, then I would expect that the technical quality of it will be very similar. Bearing in mind what we were both saying before about huge architecture documents which it's able to digest. I also suspect the writing quality won't be as seamless, if you like, as what we've seen from OpenAI. But I'd quite happily be surprised, and I was, like I said, shocked when I saw their research, which said that, and specifically writing style. Yeah, because that's a very specific thing, which I didn't think the model was great at. But writing style, twice as many people preferred it. So we will see.
Yeah. I am kind of curious to see because, like I was just sort of talking in length about, OpenAI's deep research writing style is pretty good. I liked the dense, straightforward, comprehensive responses. But yeah, one way to
Well,
find out.
I think I told you about a little experiment which I ran, which is a little bit naughty. So as you know, I've done a lot of Airbnb consultancy, and in the UK we have a very complicated VAT scheme called TOMS. But
And
the
just quickly
details don't,
for all the American viewers, VAT is value added tax. That's not
yes,
really something
not
that,
value added tariffs, okay?
yeah, that's a bit poignant. Anyways, go on.
And moving swiftly on. Yes. Basically, it's a complicated tax scheme. There's just been lots of stuff going through court about what you can do and what you can't do. And there've been a few cases come through. Well, one case in particular, Sonder, where it was kind of bringing in some new potentially case law. And it was very confusing. No one really understood or knew what was going on. So I got deep research to kind of look into it and do a report. Probably one of the shortest it's ever done, about kind of 22 pages or so. But without saying anything, I just kind of sent it out to a whole bunch of my previous consultancy clients because I thought it'd be useful, and B, I wanted to know if kind of anyone spotted or suspected anything. And it was almost the opposite. Almost everyone said, "Well, yeah, I've been trawling the web for like resources, and there's been a few blogs written by accountants or industry experts, but like I found nothing which has the quality and depth of this report." Actually, and this was a little bit gutting, but also a little bit amazing. Someone said to me, "Wow, since you started doing consultancy, Chris, you've really upped your game." It's like, ouch, ouch. So yes, I then had to actually tell people, "Hey guys, this wasn't me."
Yeah.
And that caused quite a lot of shock because, like that's how good the writing quality is. I wouldn't say I'm an amazing writer, but I'm pretty competent and I've done it enough over the years. But yeah, like I said, it definitely outshone me.
I think, congratulations that you now have a tool that ups your game, and also, it's a bit painful to hear.
It is. It is.
But though I think it's touching on a very important point that really underlines an important framework or mindset to have going into this is rather than trying to just, find an AI that seems nice or interesting or, oh yeah, it can do things almost as well as I can. Find the AIs that do things better than you do in areas that you have more domain knowledge, where you have sufficient domain knowledge, I'll say. I'm not going to say where you have more domain knowledge than the AI, because for one thing, it's kind of hard to necessarily determine that, and also it might have more than a lot of things by now. But as long as you have sufficient domain knowledge, and you basically work on the skill of corralling and focusing and directing the AI, it's if it's a better writer than you are, and if it's doing a better job at research than you're doing, then hey, you have essentially an intern who maybe at this point it's not so much an intern, but a full-time round-the-clock employee who's very good at some specific things, needs a decent amount of hand-holding, and as long as you provide said extra full-time employee with sufficient guidelines and instructions, you get some pretty good work back.
Nice. I like it. Well,
Yeah.
that sounds like a good note to finish on, doesn't it?
Yep. Well, I know that we didn't actually use Gemini Deep Research in this call. You know,
Mhm.
in terms of models, Claude 3.7 Sonnet's pretty darn good at high-level thinking and communication, really effective, clear communication, especially in a technical setting. Gemini is currently the star when it comes to just raw programming talent, and OpenAI's deep research blows Perplexity clear out of the water. We're gonna find out next time how Google compares with their deep research.
Yes.
But that's all for today.